Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Online Warriors podcast. It's the Halloween episode.
The witching hour.
That felt like a very, non-festive way to say it's the Halloween episode. This episode's coming out the day before Halloween. What do they call this again? There's a name for this.
All Hallows Eve.
No, I thought that was a fancy name for Halloween. No, this is
No, it is the day before.
Night?
All Hallows Eve is the day before Halloween.
What
No,
Beggars Night?
I don't know.
Am I making that up?
Why do you think they call it All Christmas Eve? It's the day before Christmas.
I feel
Beggars
like one
Night
of you is wrong.
A regional term. Beggars Night is a regional term for the practice of going to trick or treat in the period before Halloween night. Although it doesn't specifically say. Oh yeah, here we go. In Des Moines, Iowa, Beggars Night falls on October 30th. In Washington, D.C., Beggars Night fell on October. Yeah, so there's just like random places have done Beggars Night.
So we're
I
releasing this on Iowa's Beggars Night. So there's that.
Yeah, so happy Beggars Night. So wait, All Hallows Eve is also the 30th?
I don't know now.
All Hallows Eve is just a movie. It's not even a day.
Well,
it's a movie that came out in it's a movie that came out in 2013. That's all Google is giving me right now. Yeah, Halloween or Halloween with an apostrophe in it. You ever see that? In between the two E's, there's an apostrophe.
Between the two
Less
E's?
commonly known as
Halloween?
Yeah. Halloween. Less commonly known as All Halloween, All Hallows Eve, or All Saints Eve. So it is. Halloween is All Hallows Eve. They're the same thing. Confirmed.
The more you know.
So, anyways, happy Beggars Night. We got a great episode for you guys today. We're going to be talking a little Apple TV Plus action. Remember that streaming service? Actually, I think I might have talked about it last week because shrinking is back. But streaming service that I go on really hard for like 2 months out of the year, which is kind of like most streaming services, to be honest. Going to be talking about Severance Season 2's trailer that just dropped this past week. We're going to be talking about Love Hurts, the trailer we got for that movie, and the burgeoning acting career of Marshawn Lynch. I'm prepared for me to harp on that aspect in particular. And we're going to be talking about the Oregon Trail. Have any of you guys had dysentery lately?
Unfortunately, I have dysentery right now.
Dysentery is like, let's just get this out of the way before we even talk about this stuff. Dysentery is when you have diarrhea so bad that you die, right?
I think so. I mean, I think
That's kind of the
dysentery
gist.
is like an actual virus or bacteria. But yeah, you basically poop until you die.
Right. Because I feel like it's got to be something more than that, because otherwise wouldn't they just be like, man, he had diarrhea so hard that he died? Like, I don't know. There must be something more to it. Let's talk about the Oregon Trail. Let's just start with that one, because I think this is very exciting. So the long and short of it, Apple's in the news twice today. Big day for Apple. They're making an Oregon Trail movie. Action comedy with musical numbers. We're talking Pasek and Paul. They were the guys that did La La Land. They're going to be doing the songwriting and musical production on this movie. And otherwise, it's going to be a live action comedy based around the Oregon Trail.
Yo, I am so excited.
I will say
for
right
this.
now, this movie is kind of going to make itself, right? I mean,
There's so much meat on the bone.
There's so much meat on the bone, and like not even just looking at the success of recent movies like the Mario movie, like even thinking about movies like Jumanji, which I feel like kind of play on similar tropes, or like this movie may play on similar tropes to that. Like Jumanji was a huge success. I think there were 2 sequels to it. There was at least 1. This feels like it's got legs. And I say that as someone who has never played Oregon Trail a day in his life.
Are you kidding? Both of you guys?
Well,
Seriously?
hang on.
Stop.
Before we go into this
Sorry,
grill sesh,
I'm incensed.
forget video game movie. Just from the concept of like a movie of journeying to the West for a better life, that in itself could be a good musical movie.
But like, you guys have to understand. So the Oregon Trail was incepted, I think, as an educational video game. But it became more than that. Like, the way that you could die, or the people in your, wagon party could die, ended up becoming so funny. And I guess not like, obviously, no one wants to die of dysentery in real life, but even crossing the channel on your wagon and making sure that your cows don't tip over. Like, there's so many things that could become comically wrong in this movie, and neither of you know about the different ways to die.
But here's the thing with that.
Because you didn't play.
When we were kids in the mid-90s, There were so much better computer games than fucking Oregon Trail.
No, so
Well, but that's not
there's
the point,
old
though.
school
That's not the
Oregon
point.
Trail, the classic, mostly text-based one. But then they also had iterations that were more graphically.
I said what I said.
I think you're wrong.
Well, they had a card game too. They have current present tense a card game. Like it's a whole thing. Like I think you're touching on something important to discuss, Nerdbomber, which is like as someone who has never played the Oregon Trail, like I'm still part of the zeitgeist in the sense that like I grew up with that generation, so like I know about dying of dysentery. Like I don't know the cow stuff you're talking about, but I get the general gist of like you have to go from what is the place called? What's the place you start? It's like it's a little tiny town that has a really funny name, and then you go all the way up to Oregon, and it takes a while, and people die of varying silly causes. Like I guess my question is, does going and playing, because like I bet I could probably like go play the game in a web browser right now or something. Like I guess I don't know how I would play it right now if I wanted to. Like I want to play like the OG,
you can play
like the
OG
text-based
text-based one in a web browser as we speak. And I would encourage you, if you want to check out the rest of this episode, like just glaze over and play Oregon Trail in your web browser, I encourage you to do so. That is how much I love that game. And even so, I think this is going to be our loser thing here. Whoever loses the trivia, because we know it's not going to be me, whoever loses trivia this year has to play both the original Oregon Trail and, if we can figure out how to do it, the one from like DOS, like the 90s.
Do they have to play, or do they have to make it west?
They have to make you have to make it west.
Yeah, you gotta
and
make
also,
it west.
by the way, Nerdbomber, we're like tied. So like take all your I'm gonna win, zippy zapping and zippy zap it.
And also,
'Cause
Nerdbomber,
there's a lot of game left.
we could just say who's going to play it at this point. Like mathematically, we can just say it's me.
It's I don't know that we've affirmed that yet, but you're on thin ice. The question I was getting to though is it a prerequisite for me to see this movie to play the game? Like, am I going to miss out on just because I know people die of dysentery on this thing? Like, is that enough gateway information to like get in on the ground floor with this, or do I need to like get all the way to Oregon?
It probably depends on how they frame this movie. I'm going to guess that you're just going to need to know like dysentery jokes, maybe some like, oh, what do I need in my wagon at the very beginning? Like, I'm sure you won't have to have played the game in order to get the movie, because I'm assuming the younger generation, and I don't want to speak for, what is Gen Alpha? Is Gen Alpha like the high school kids now? I don't know if they'd even have access to Oregon Trail. So they might not even be able to, get the references. Who knows? So they probably don't want to gatekeep people in the movie. So I don't know. Probably you won't have to know anything about the game.
The other thing I'm curious about here is like, does this turn into one of those things where like the movie is super successful and as a result, like the original DOS game is like suddenly super popular
Dude,
again
I hope
and like
so.
becomes like retro culture? Like, I think that would be cool. I would like to try it. Now, additional question. Again, we like I should say, we don't have any further details about this movie than I have already provided. Will Speck and Josh Gordon are reportedly attached to direct. Kenny and Keith Lucas penning the screenplay along with Max Reisman. It's about Oregon Trail. I mentioned Pasek and Paul. Like there's not a whole lot else to it. Who is the funniest actor to repeatedly die of dysentery, and why is it Michael Cera? I start the bidding at Michael Cera,
Okay.
and I need to see a raise of some kind from one of you. Because I the way I see this happening is what I think would be a plausible approach for this movie is someone is in like that Tom Cruise movie where he just keeps dying over and over again, or like Happy Death Day. Like it's just someone who has to keep going along the Oregon Trail until they get to the end, and Michael Cera keeps dying from having too much diarrhea. That's what I would hope for this movie to be. And maybe it'll be something different than that, but wouldn't that be good? That's not a very good question to ask on a podcast. But like,
my alternate
anyone
casting
funnier than
choice
Michael Cera
would be Michael Cera. Seems good, but very, very obvious. Sometimes I like to think outside the box of a casting choice that I think would be almost lightning in a bottle, but would be very unexpected, and that would be Ray Barone.
Is he still in the game? I agree that would be extremely funny because it would be just so against type. I mean, you get like Morgan Freeman. He could die of dysentery. Like, there's so many funny people.
You take that
Diarrhea is
back.
funny.
I'm going to give you one. And not only is this going to be potentially really funny, but also a decent segue if you so choose, Marshawn Lynch.
No.
Marshawn Lynch, it could be funny. We will talk about Marshawn Lynch later. I'm convinced that when Marshawn Lynch acts in things, he doesn't even read the script. I think he's got like serious Nicolas Cage energy where like when he comes on a set, you don't really know what he's going to do. And that could work here. But I also I guess I don't know what he would do if like the director was like, all right, Marshawn, act like you're dying from having too much diarrhea. The bottom line is diarrhea is funny. All right.
It is.
And if you don't think so, get on board. This is going to be funny. This has to be a W. What does scare me about this? The one thing that scares me about this is that Apple is making it. And if there's one thing that Apple does, if it's going to be on Apple TV, there's a much higher than typical probability that it will languish because no one will know that it exists. Like,
that's fair.
We're talking about it because it made news and like we're a podcast and like this is what we do, right? But like Apple, like they come out with stuff, like they came out with a show that has like Cate Blanchett in it, who's like amazing, and it's like got a bunch of famous people in it, and like no one even knows it exists because they just like for some reason refuse to advertise their properties.
Okay, but however,
unless it's Severance.
But one of the properties that they did advertise very heavily was that Ryan Reynolds, Will Ferrell Christmas movie. I feel like that got peppered over every single advertisement ever. It was on during the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. It was on every single ad that I watched across any streaming service. It was everywhere.
And I didn't see it, by the way. So take the L, Apple. Yeah, I mean, they very selectively, like I said, like we're going to talk about Severance here in a bit. Like Severance, they do market it, although Severance also is so good that they don't really have to. People are just like, they've been waiting for like 3 years for Severance to come back. So that's kind of a bit of a special case. But they just struggle sometimes, it feels like, with things that like aren't Ted Lasso, where they're like, do people actually want to see this? And let's just put it out there, and if the people want to, they'll come. It's like, that's not a very good strategy. So that's like the one thing I could see going wrong with this, but it also seems like the kind of thing that would have really good word of mouth advertisement of its own right, just because it's an Oregon Trail movie that like I think it has a great concept. It seems like it has the right people behind it. All you got to do is lock down Michael Cera, and like I don't really know what that guy's up to these days. So theoretically, it shouldn't be all that hard. So yeah, everyone get your covered wagon. I don't know what else to say because I haven't played the game. This will be I think this will be a suitable punishment for, like you said, realistically either Techtic or myself. We'll have to crunch the numbers later to see what Techtic is going to have to do to crawl out of the hole he's in. It's very possible that he's correct, and there's no way for him to do it at this point mathematically. Techtic, I didn't know you'd never played it. It's nice to have a brother in arms in that regard. So
yeah, there's a laundry list of childhood games that is not Oregon Trail.
That's true. It's a wide, wide world, and it's a wild world out there as well. Let's stick with Apple. Let's talk about Severance, because this is a show. First of all, I meant to ask this before we started recording, and I just didn't. Have you guys watched season 1 of Severance?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay, thank God. I was really concerned that I was just going to be sitting here talking about Severance, and you're going to have no idea what I was talking about. Listeners, if you have not watched season 1 of Severance, you got to go do whatever it is you have to do to get a free trial of Apple TV Plus. They're probably still giving them out at this point. Get your 3 months or whatever. This is the right time because you can hop in. Actually, maybe wait a month. I'm trying to do math. Comes out January 17th is when season 2 comes out.
Yeah, then they usually trickle episodes.
So you need to wait a little bit. But give yourself a Christmas gift around Christmas time. Lock in and watch all of season 1. Severance, at the time that season 1 came out, because this had to have been 21, 22 time frame, it was really, for me, right up there with Succession at the time as really the best thing going. One of the most engaging shows to watch, just in terms of I feel like it's one of the first shows in a while that has really effectively done the thing that Lost did with what J.J. Abrams called the mystery box of asking questions and not always giving immediate payoffs or any payoffs in terms of answers to those questions, and just leaving you in a state of kind of unknown distress, but in a very pleasing way. Season 2, I mean, the trailer that we got here, they're playing the hits a little bit, certainly, in the sense of it doesn't actually wind up showing a whole lot, in my opinion, and it's playing a lot of voiceover from season 1, so there's not a lot of new information, but it's they kind of know what they have to do at this point, right? Which is people love this show. There's a very, very crazed following that's been asking for any sort of hint at season 2 for like literal years at this point. So they don't have to give much. I think they gave enough to get me hyped up and be really excited for this show. The big kind of drop here in the trailer is Mark S shows up and there's new people, right? Like I do wonder immediately what happened to like John Turturro and the other 2 people whose unfortunately their actor names I do not know right now.
Well,
But,
wasn't he a watermelon sculpture in this trailer?
He was a watermelon sculpture in this trailer, and I deeply question what that means. Like, I don't think they would necessarily kill him.
Well, didn't they have like a fruit party though? Wasn't that their thing?
No, waffle parties.
Waffle party. Sorry.
Waffle parties was the thing.
But they had fruit.
Season. There may be there may be a fruit party here. I really don't know. That's the joy of this show, is that there is a potentially deep well of lore that we don't even know about yet. And there's just this pervasive weirdness. I mean, the whole thing is like kind of a very compelling Black Mirror episode, right? That just is kind of going to keep going. That's the whole shtick, and I'm absolutely here for it.
Do you know what the best part of the whole trailer was?
The song by The Who, because I freaking love that.
The very end where it said, "Return to office."
Oh, yeah. You know that they've had that joke locked and loaded in the holster, if you want to call it a joke. They've had that ready to go for like, God, probably since they realized they were making a season 2, right? Because, with everything that's happened. That was pretty good. I've seen a lot of like, I think this trailer is like a minute and a half long. Like, it was not very long. There's been a lot of people doing like frame by frames of this, like to just try and gather any information they can. I guess at one point when he's running through the hallways, there's a lot of hair on the floor, which is the kind of thing that you wouldn't see when he's just running through the trailer or running through the halls. But like, again, as people seeing that and being like, what the heck could that possibly mean? It's a classic move for this show.
I appreciate people who go frame by frame, but I feel like in a show like this, like sometimes with Marvel stuff, I'm interested in that kind of frame by frame analysis of trailers because, there's so much comic background that you can you already know the story. Like, it's not really a spoiler, so you can kind of try to parse where it's going. But with something like this, I feel like I want to be surprised. I think what the first season did so well was kind of kept me on my toes. I didn't know what was going to happen at any point in time, and I kind of like that. So I don't know if I want to go in with too much more knowledge of season 2. Like, I don't want to have theories. I just want to let it happen to me. I want to experience it. Does that make sense?
It does. And again, I think this trailer kind of to that end, like there were a lot of things that we need answers on that we did not see. And I think that is good. And, there has to be some awareness from the showrunners of like, people are going to just, rip this thing apart and try and figure out anything they can. Like, I don't know that we saw Patricia Arquette at all in this trailer, and she was like a huge character in season 1. So like the question of what happened to her after the major cliffhanger at the end of season 1, not getting into spoilers, like what happens to her after that. I think there is stuff that they definitely are holding back, which is good. And I could not be more excited. There's also like stuff to be broken down, not even from a narrative perspective, but like the dynamic movement of the camera in the first chunk of this trailer is like actually extremely impressive. Like just the way it moves. I'm not sure we've seen stuff like that. A lot of people might not know, or maybe people do know and they love it. I don't know. Do you guys know who directs? I don't know if he directs every episode of Severance, but like I think he's a producer and he directs most episodes. It's a person who you know.
Is it you?
It's no, unfortunately it's not me. I certainly wish it was me. I'm Googling now to confirm, but I'm like 99% sure it's Ben Stiller.
Is it really?
Yeah. Yeah, directed by Ben Stiller. And the show is directed collectively by Ben Stiller and this guy whose name I absolutely cannot pronounce, Eoif McCardle. And Ben Stiller obviously kind of goes without saying. He's been in the game for a while. So like he kind of knows what's going on. I think he maybe knows what people want to see. But I find that very compelling. I'm also mad at him because I feel like he's part of why it's taken so long for season 2 to come around. But I'll probably get over it because this looks like it's going to be really incredible. I mentioned the music from The Who. I had to Google and find out what that song was called. And then after the day this trailer came out, I listened to that song like all day. Because sometimes I feel like that. You guys ever feel like that at work? You're just running through hallways and there's trance-like music playing?
All the time.
For me, that's like once a week.
All the time.
Man, this show, this is a show that I think, again, like many years from now, we're going to look back and be like, man, this show was really prescient in a lot of the things it was trying to say. And like some of it's very surface, right? Of like the whole premise is that someone can sever themselves from their work life, and like, you know, the psychological implications of that, like taking part of yourself and just trapping them at work. Like there's a lot of like surface level analysis and commentary on the current state of working life in America and the world that can be had there. But there's also like deeper stuff too that like also has me wanting to go ahead and rewatch season 1, which like I probably will do that before season 2 comes out, if only because it's been like what feels like 100 years since season 1 was out.
I mean,
like, I don't remember when I watched the last episode. It was probably like, again, 2021 that I did.
That's my only gripe with streaming services. I mean, there's other gripes as well, I guess. But that's my main gripe with all of these original shows is that it takes literal years between seasons for almost every show now. Unless this is on like network television, like I got to give it to Abbott Elementary. They're cranking out season after season. You don't have to wait more than a year for a new season. And God, like with 3-year gaps or whatever it was, like it's just too much. I don't remember what happened. I need recaps.
I mean, look at Stranger Things. The last episode of Stranger Things that came out was in July 22. The last season is not expected until 2025. So like it's the same sort of situation. Streaming changed the game in so many ways, right? Like we don't even need to get into how many ways it changed the game, but one of the things it did, at least seemingly, is it raised the bar on what production standards are, or rather what they can be for television. And as a result, you know, you're not, you go back to like the 90s and like there were shows like ER and The West Wing, like they were putting out 24 episode seasons twice a year, and they were hour-long episodes, and like, and by the way, like very good television, like not just throw crap at the wall and see what sticks. But times have just fully changed, and like the expectation now is that every episode of a given show on a streaming service, especially prestige like, you know, Stranger Things or Severance, like it's demanded that each of those episodes basically be produced like a movie, which is certainly going to extend the timeline. I think it's like it's interesting because as a collective, like no one wants that, right? Like, yeah, it's great that Stranger Things looks like a movie, and it's great that Severance looks like a movie, but like I think there's also just a general craving for like content at a faster pace. Good storytelling in particular.
Don't get me wrong. You know, I appreciate cinematography, but at the end of the day, like what pulls me into these shows is great storytelling. And I also get some of the timeline that is being taken as they have to, you know, write the new season. I totally understand that, but I'm here for the story. Like if we just step back some of the cinematography quality, I wouldn't mind. It's kind of like with video games when we're seeing games take like 10 years to make because they need more pixels. And I'm just like, I would have taken it sooner without a few pixels.
Well, there's something to be said for the deliberate nature of the pace. Like, I think part of it with the shows I mentioned in the 90s, like it was what they did was they created a tight-knit group of very, very well-defined characters in locations like the White House or a hospital or like just, you know, in a, you know, sitcom, like someone's house or someone's apartment. And like, it was like they had so many stories that they wanted to get out. And that was why the pace was so fast, as they said, okay, this episode is going to be about this character doing this thing. This next episode is going to be about this character doing this thing. And like shows like Stranger Things and Severance, like they certainly aren't like that, right? Like I have to give them that, is that they're not telling stories in that same way. I guess what I'm saying is I kind of wish there were more shows that did. And like you mentioned Abbott Elementary, which I think is a very good example of a show that has that sort of cadence and to its credit, and it uses that cadence very well. But it does make shows like Stranger Things and Severance very frustrating to be fans of. And, you know, like maybe us complaining about this is just totally first world problems, right? The fact that we don't get something that is this good faster, like, you know, maybe we're just, maybe we should call the ambulance. I don't know. But Severance is coming. Season 2 is coming January 17th. The wait is over. Well, it's going to be over in a few months. So again, if you haven't watched it, I cannot recommend it highly enough. You should go check it out on Apple TV Plus, which again, I think if you don't have it or haven't had it, you can probably get a free 3 months like pretty easily. So you should consider doing that on the proper time frame. We'll take a short break now before coming back to talk about Love Hurts and Marshawn Lynch. But before we do that, It's that time again. Mr. Stephen Keller, take a bow. Stephen supports us on Patreon. He is a Patreon producer on this show. And as a result of that producership, he gets this shout out every single episode for continuing to support the show, get back to the show, help us keep this thing going. We are super, super appreciative to Stephen and to all of our Patreon subscribers. Stephen supports us at the night level, which is the highest of our 3 levels of support. He gets that producer shout out every episode. He gets input into the weekly game segment, of course, access to the monthly secret segment and vlog, and the occasional guest spot on the show. You can flip back in time just a couple weeks now to hear him chat with us on the show about various things. Hopefully he had a good time. We certainly did. There is also a Squire level of support on Patreon, which gets you access to the monthly secret segment and vlog, and a page level, which gets you access to the monthly secret segment. We talked about unexplained experiences that we've had in our own lives on the secret segment for the month of October, just to kind of, embrace spooky season. Without getting into the details or spoiling anything for the Patreon people, we've been through some stuff. So maybe worth checking out. Maybe this is the month worth hopping on to our Patreon. So you can head over to patreon.com/onlinewarriorspodcast. Consider checking out that content and talking to us, talking to Steven, giving back to this show, helping to keep the microphones on. And thanks again to Steven. We'll be right back to talk about Love Hurts.
This is The Gorge. It's a podcast where my friend Sarah and I gorge ourselves on overanalyzing a topic.
The body count
It's
in this children's movie.
It's insanely high. The reason he's able to be a good assassin is because no one would expect a gorilla to kill you.
I made the incredibly stupid decision to start Marble Hornets.
And the robot says, I know where we can find your baby. It was stolen by Cap'n Crunch.
He sounds like Chuck Huber.
Yeah. How did you know? I was going to say that. The Gorge. 3 times a month, wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, we are back to talk about Love Hurts. This was a trailer we got for a movie coming out on February 7th, 2025. I put the 20 in front of the 7 instead of the 25. Classic mistake. The big story here, or I guess what most people would probably consider the biggest story here. This is bad, but I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name. I'm going to do my best. I'm just going to call him Short Round. Short Round from Indiana Jones. And also the guy from Everything Everywhere All at Once. Ke Huy Quan is...
And also the Goonies.
Leading role.
Come on, man.
And also the Goonies. I'm not a big Goonies guy, but yes, that is true. This is, I believe, his first leading role in an action movie. And man, he's giving, and I say this only in the positive sense because I think Jackie Chan has like a fairly tarnished legacy at this point, but he's giving like 90s era Jackie Chan energy.
Right? Action comedy vibes. It feels like there's been a hole in action comedy movies that isn't The Rock or Kevin Hart. And like, I'm here for it.
I caution you against saying that statement because you do have movies like Fall Guy and what was the Chris Evans one on Apple TV? We were just talking about how Apple TV movies don't get a following, but you know what I'm talking about.
Ghosted.
Yes. Like they exist. There's just not a lot of them.
So in this movie, Ke Huy Quan plays a realtor named Marvin Gable in Milwaukee. He, according to the trailer at least, is very successful, but it turns out, and you learn about halfway through the trailer, that he has foregone a dark past to become a realtor, and his dark past comes back to find him, predominantly in the form of a former partner played by Ariana DeBose. And lots of stuff happens. Sean Astin's in this movie, which I think is really great.
Sean Astin.
Certainly Marshawn Lynch, as we have mentioned, is in this movie. I continue to be fascinated and kind of overall pleased by Marshawn Lynch's burgeoning acting career. He was notably in the movie Bottoms last year, which I think all of us saw this movie, but I could be wrong. I know I
That was a
watched it.
good movie.
And he was very funny in it. I think he's clearly looking to stay in the acting game, and I think we're all the better for it. Here's what this movie cannot afford to do, because I think this movie could be very successful. They really need to avoid... This was from the producers of Nobody and Violent Night. 2 movies that certainly have a sense of humor, but don't necessarily wear it on their sleeve. I think the comedy aspect of this as an action comedy is particularly important. I have no doubt that the people making this movie and the lead in particular can sell the action sequences, But
Well-
I think that making a movie like Nobody, which like I never saw Nobody, but it looks like a pretty dark turn from Bob Odenkirk. Like I think that would be a crucial misuse of what Short Round would be good at, if that makes sense. I don't want that for this movie. I want this movie to lean into the levity a little bit, or maybe even a lot of it.
He does have a bit of an advantage with going through like the action sequences and the movements, because not only is he an actor, but he's also a stunt choreographer. So having that background, to me, bodes to someone who's going to really sell these action sequences and do a really good job there.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I have no trouble believing that those parts are all going to be basically perfect. And like I said, he's giving off prime Jackie Chan energy, which is a super good thing. But I do think this movie needs to make an effort to have that same energy and like have Rush Hour, Shanghai Nights, I should say. Like those movies, you know, he doesn't have kind of another guy with him, like a Chris Tucker or an Owen Wilson, to kind of cut through the heavy bits. And I don't think Ariana DeBose is in place to provide that. And like that's what worries me a little bit.
Well,
I
that's
think
what
that's
Marshawn
what would make
Lynch
a
is
movie
gonna
like this
provide.
really good. But he's not the good guy. Like
I don't know.
I don't think
There
he's gonna
was
be in
one
the-
scene
He's not going to be in the movie
where
enough.
he was tackling someone else that wasn't him. So I think he's going to turn coat. Telling you, calling it now.
I think it's more so that I don't think he's going to be in the movie enough to kind of be that rat-a-tat role player with Ke Huy Quan. Like I worry about that a little bit. That said, like I certainly think this could potentially be very, very good. I do wonder, and Nerdbomber, you mentioned The Fall Guy before, like these movies, like The Fall Guy, I think did decently well, but for the budget that it had, I don't think it was considered a success. And like, I'll admit to being a part of that problem. I did not see that movie.
I mean, that's kind of
And
the case
I probably
with
would have liked it.
all comedies, though. Like across the board, comedies in general, whether they're action comedies, romantic comedies, comedies, nothing seems to be sticking at the box office, but they perform super well at home.
Well, the box office is weird. I mean, looking at this year in total, like there are also movies like Furiosa, Mad Max Saga, that like every critic was like, this movie's amazing. And everyone who watched it was like, this movie's amazing. And I loved Fury Road, and I still didn't go see Furiosa. Like, it's kind of hard to get to the theater when you know that it's going to be coming out on HBO Max like 3 weeks later. And by the way, guess what? It did.
Well, it's also very expensive too. Like going to the movie theaters, you
It
used to
is.
be able to, I mean, maybe spend $50 for two people to go, and that's tickets, food, drink. And now you're looking at $20 a ticket, and that's not even including food. So I don't know. It's just, you're blowing your budget very easily every time you go to the movies. So you have to be a little bit more picky and choosy about what you're going to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think the MCU really did, for all the issues I have with the MCU now, like they created event movies, and that was what got people to get up and like go to the theater. And I think Star Wars also did that. You know, again, not so much right now, but back when they dropped episode 7, like people showed up. When they dropped episode 8, people showed up. So it's tough because I don't want every movie to be an MCU Star Wars event movie. But like, yeah, people talk a lot about like, oh, back in like the 2000s, like a comedy would come out starring like Seth Rogen and who cares who else, and like everyone would go see it. And a big part of that was that movie theaters and the theater going experience were just more economically accessible, right?
I mean,
And
think about American
we're getting
Pie
off track,
and like
but-
the zeitgeist that was the American Pie movies.
But so you can have I'm glad you brought up the American Pie, because when you brought up Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan, one of the whenever I think of those movies and the action comedies that they were, and the fact that there were sequels that were all successful, one of the best lines that resonate with me is the not post-credit spoiler scene, the post-credit bloopers.
The bloopers.
Yes.
I love a blooper.
One, that needs to
Bring
be in
back
this. And
post-credit
two,
bloopers.
when Chris Tucker goes, "Oof, he ain't gonna be in Rush Hour 3." That that breaking of the fourth wall. It's those kind of things that you fall in love with the franchises.
Yeah, the Rush Hour and Rush Hour 2 because they were like mid-credits blooper sequences, like legendary. Like I remember the one you're talking about. I remember at one point Chris Tucker got a phone call, and that was like part of the blooper. Like his friend called him while he was on set, and like Jackie Chan was talking to him on the phone. It was just like so like
Fun.
It's funny to talk about it now
Carefree.
and like and kind of realize also like how much it humanized the actors. Like I don't want to read too much into it. It was just silly, goofy fun, but like I really do miss that. And you don't see that anymore. This movie would benefit from something like that, certainly. I this movie could do very well. It's just, I think what we're touching on here is that it's hard to look at any movie and say that from a box office perspective, like, this is not a movie that's intending to win awards, right? This is a movie that's intending to make money at the box office for the people that are making it. And we're living in a day and age where there is just no certain thing.
And I have to bring up,
there's no sure thing in that regard.
I have to bring up another buddy comedy that didn't know how to walk the line between action and comedy that Nerdbomber absolutely loved. The latest and greatest, Bad Boys.
Oh God, that was horrible.
The first two Bad Boys, though, they knew what they were doing.
That's why I said the latest and greatest.
That is a good example. Yeah, that is a good example. The first two were very similar to this, where like Martin Lawrence, there's always the straight man and the other guy. Like Will Smith was the straight man, like nothing was funny to him. He was just the cool action guy. And then you had Martin Lawrence, who was just like,
and they made him too
constantly.
much of a buffoon. And that's where you need to be careful on towing that line.
That's true. That's certainly true. I don't think there's any danger of that in Love Hurts. So yeah, Love Hurts coming February 7th, 2025. I'm going to be honest, it is, as good as this looks, it's hard for me to imagine going to a theater to see it unless I hear some really positive word of mouth about it. And that's a weird place to end this topic on, but that's just how I feel. I'm just being honest. So again, February 7th, 2025. Let us know if you're going to see that. Let us know what you have thought of all of these topics. I don't know if we've shouted our Twitter handles out yet. We have @OW Illeagle86, that's me, @OW Techtic, @OW Nerdbomber, and our main show account @OnlineWarriors1. Are you going to see Love Hurts? Are you a Severance fan? Do you want to be a Severance fan? What's your Oregon Trail experience like? Do you hate me for not having played it? If you're tweeting at me, you probably do hate me, or you love me. There's really no in between. So I guess just let me know. It's time for What Are You Up To Wednesday. This is the part of the show where we get into what we've been up to. And, well, I'm going to, again, just kind of punt until later because I feel like I always go first. So I'm going to turn things over to Techtic to kind of get us started here.
So the main thing that I've been working on that has been really interesting, challenging, is I've been working on learning how to use Blender. And if you don't know what Blender is, it's like, it can be used for a wide breadth of things. It can be used for sculpting things for 3D printing. It could be used for making characters that you export into Unity for like video games. It could be used for making animations for just like animated short films or whatever. It is an incredibly impressive tool, and there's so much to it, and I'm learning a lot, and I'm really engrossing myself with it, and the amount of like frustration that I get with something that just looks stupid. Like, for example, I'm trying to move a character's arm, and for whatever reason, the left and the right arm are mirroring each other. So if I manipulate the right arm, it's also moving the left arm, even though I'm not moving the left arm. And it's like frustrating, but it's also rewarding to learn something new. And so if you haven't checked out Blender, check it out, because like I said, you can definitely spin your newfound knowledge into, making minis if you like that, making a game, making a movie, whatever. It's a super powerful tool, and it's kind of a neat new experience.
Right on, man. I've heard a lot about Blender. I don't frankly know a whole lot about using it, but I don't know. I don't know what to say. Keep fighting the good fight. I'm going to take the reins. Nerdbomber, sit tight, because I have to talk about A Quiet Place, The Road Ahead. This is a game that we were lucky enough to get a press kit for, so we thank you for the code, developers. This game, of course, is based on the Quiet Place franchise. I will say, as I start my mini review, I've only played I think 2.5 to 3 hours of this game, so there's a lot left to go. There's a lot to like about this game. It certainly delivers in the sense that the encounters that you have with the creatures are just terrifying. Nerdbomber, you would not do well in this game.
And this is why I did not review it.
It is very outright. I mean, there are some very interesting and cool mechanical choices that are being made. So obviously the whole purpose of the game, right, is that you have to be quiet or these things will hear you. They cannot see. And you can actually, and I have done this, there is an option to turn the microphone on your DualSense controller on. So the creature is actually listening to the environment in which you are playing the game. Which, by the way, if you're doing that, make sure you play with headphones, because I screwed that up and I died because of it.
Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that. If it's coming through your speakers, that would mess you up.
Yeah. It seems obvious, right? No, not for me. Not until I died. This is a game that I don't know if this is actually a term that people call games like this, but it's what I'm calling an instant death game, in the sense that you don't have health. If the creature gets to you, you die. That's it. A short cinematic plays that I assume you get like disemboweled or something. Who knows? And the game is essentially, in a lot of ways, it is a walking simulator. You're certainly never running because running is too loud, guys. Try and pay attention. You can't make noise. So you're kind of going around, interacting with environments, gathering supplies, trying to escape from the creatures. I mean, literally, like, so if you go up to a door, let me give you just one example. You go up to a door and you go to open the door. It's not just like press a button and the door opens. It's you press a button and then with the control stick, you are responsible for swinging the door open. The idea being, at least from what I can tell, certain doors have squeaky hinges if you move them fast, and other doors have squeaky hinges if you move them slow. So you have to figure out what speed to open the door at so the monsters don't come and get you. It's super stressful. The first time I died in this game, I was unscrewing the screws on a vent, and I unscrewed the screws, and then it was like, pull the vent open. And I was like, sure. And I pulled it open, the vent cover hit the wall, and that was it. I died. So like, it is like, I don't say this as a negative. It is unforgiving. Like, if you stray from the general premise for even a second and you lose focus for even a second, if you walk on broken glass, if you walk into a can and it tips over, that's in a lot of cases, that's it.
It's not even like you have a chance to get away.
You tip, so it depends on the size of the noise. So you're also given a phonometer, which is a device that basically shows how loud you are being compared to the environment. So the environment is such in this game where, for example, one of the scenes I've played already takes place in the rain, and in the rain you're comparatively safer because rain is loud and adds a certain level of ambient noise to the environment. So there are certain noises you can make in that scenario that won't kill you. But like if you're in a quiet room in a hospital and you knock over a tin can, that thing gonna get you. Long story short, this game, a couple of I guess I would say drawbacks. It takes a very long time to ramp up. The first like hour of this game, I'm gonna say it was boring. There was a lot of story building, a lot of cutscenes, a lot of trying to make me like characters, and for most of the time I was like, just get me to the monster part. And it did deliver. Eventually it did, but it took quite a long time to get there. It took a very long time introducing mechanics, some of which were kind of pretty easy to figure out without the introduction. So that's definitely one of the drawbacks. I think this game is doing some very good things in terms of making use of like I don't want to say collectibles, but like notes that you find. So like this is a common game thing where you find a note and you read it. The difference in the Quiet Place universe is that it's literally like the only reliable way in which people can communicate a lot of the time because they can't talk. So like they're carrying conversations over written notes that you can read, and there's kind of a story explanation for that. It doesn't feel wedged in, which I think the game is making good use of. So really enjoying it so far. Perfect for spooky month, obviously. It is stressful, so like the reason I've only played a few hours of it at this point is because I can really play an hour at a time, and then my nerves are just frayed, and I have to like walk away and play Blatro, which I can do in a comparatively mindless way. So I'll probably be playing it more over the course of the next few weeks, but I am enjoying it. I want to thank the developers again for the key. Yeah, I think I talked a lot, so that's going to be the extent of my update for today. I will turn it over to Nerdbomber to wrap us up.
All right, so I have two things I want to talk about. The first one being the M. Night Shyamalan movie Trap, which finally hit HBO. I know we were talking about how we don't go to the movie theater to see movies, and in this case, I'm so glad I waited for it to be on streaming because holy crap, it was bad. Like, downright bad. I really loved the premise. I remember when we watched the trailer, we talked about it on the show. I was super stoked for this movie. I thought it was such an interesting concept that at this concert, the serial killer is attending it with his daughter, and somehow the police have figured out that the serial killer they're looking for is at the concert, so they kind of hem him in, and he has to figure out a way to get out. And I don't want to give any spoilers, but nothing in this movie was believable. Nothing felt like it was explained well. The characters, like, I just didn't understand why they were doing what they were doing. It all just felt really nonsensical. The people who wrote the movie seemed like they'd never been to a concert before. It just not great. I don't know. I expected so much more from this movie. I had heard a few people tell me that it was entertaining, and I'm just like, I was literally sitting through this movie and I would just continually look over at Techtic and be like, what are we watching? Like, what is happening?
The guy was a superhuman. He did traits impossible traits to a human being.
And like, I don't know. I felt bad after we watched this movie because when it hit Max, I was like, hey, this is what we're watching tonight. And I literally felt guilty at the end of the hour 45 or however long this movie was because it was that bad. And I felt bad for wasting Techtic's time. So don't get got by another M. Night Shyamalan movie. I am learning my lesson. I will not get got again. So M. Night, not again. You won't get me. Sorry.
Good night, M. Night, you might say. I hear you.
You're going to watch it anyway, aren't you?
I'm going to be watching this movie. Yeah. M. Night, the thing about M. Night that's so wonderful is that if this movie is as bad as you're saying it is, I'm probably still going to get a real hoot out of watching it. like we watched Old and that movie's so bad. And like The Happening is like a meme level movie at this point. Like I watched Old and I was like, this is so stupid. And I had the best time. So I do anticipate the same sort of thing happening here, and that's okay. So yeah, I not to diminish your feedback on the movie, but I may show up next week or the week after being like, yeah, I also got by M. Night, and I accept that risk. All right. Very good. Anything else to update us on?
Yeah, so the other thing that I did was I spent a lot of time playing the new Call of Duty, Black Ops 6. I've mostly focused on multiplayer right now. A couple of things that I've really liked so far. I do think that Call of Duty is back. Like, I've tried the last few entries and almost immediately bounced off. I didn't have a lot of fun. Something about them just felt bad. Like the pacing of the gameplay was not great. They've dialed it in here. The Omni movement is super smooth and it makes the game feel really like next gen. And honestly, it's about time that you're able to like aim when you're prone. I never understood why you were so limited in the other installments of Call of Duty, but they finally nailed that and got that right. I also really like that they returned to the progression system of the old games. In World War III, I dropped into it for a while, and instead of like a linear progression system where, you know, like, hey, at level 10, you're going to unlock this gun, there was this weird battle pass grid thing, and nothing really made sense. Like, I'm sure if I spent more than 5 minutes looking at it, I would have figured it out, but I prefer the more linear progression. I know what I'm working towards, and it just feels better to me. Also, matchmaking is great. I never feel like I'm, getting frustrated. I feel like I'm always playing with people who are around my level, which is fun because if you're, getting spawn killed every game, that's just not a good time. So I think they're doing a good job with matchmaking, at least in the beginning. And Kill Order is a fun new mode. Halo Infinite also has something very similar, but basically every team has like a high value target, and it cycles through, as you eliminate a high value target, a new player on the team is selected, and each team has one, and you basically have to either protect yours or hunt theirs down and take them out. And I don't know, it's just a fun new mode. I enjoyed it in Halo Infinite, and it is fun in Call of Duty as well. But my big negative here. So I really want to play zombies with Techtic. Call of Duty is a split screen game.
Shout
it's
out
one
to
of the few.
Activision support for not existing.
Right. So he logged in. He has never, I don't think he's played Call of Duty in the last 5 years, right? And the last time he played Call of Duty, he dropped in for maybe half an hour with me, didn't do anything. We don't play with mics, so we can't swear at anybody. He didn't do anything. We're on a console. There's no way to cheat, etc. He tries to log in. He finds out he has been permanently banned from Black Ops 6 before even loading the game for the first time. And apparently this is a known problem. They had a hacker problem where a bunch of accounts got taken over and people linked their Steam accounts and used them to, game the system, had cheating macros and bots and shit like that. So he's trying to recover his account. However, he can't log into the account. And the only way you can get Activision support is to log in. So currently he's kind of at a crossroads where he has no access to his account. He may be banned from all Call of Duties for the foreseeable future.
All Activision games.
So that's a real bummer. And I feel like they need to get their shit together because I was then on Twitter, which don't ask for help, by the way, on Twitter. You're just going to get a lot of spam bots, but it is a very common problem. A lot of people have faced this. On console, there really is not an easy way to, have cheating systems installed. And a lot of people who have played on console are having the same issue that he is. And that's a real bummer because you know what? I would love to play zombies with my best friend. And now I can't. So
Techtic, what did you do, man? Come clean. What did you do? How'd you hack it?
I told someone, I told a kid that I banged his mom.
He's joking, by the way.
Classic. So and that got you perma-banned from all Activision games. Boy, if that was the law of the land, there'd be no one on those games anymore. Well, that's a bummer. I do, I do thinking about it, kind of like the idea, like when I was playing like Modern Warfare 2, like back on the Xbox 360, I had a real rip-roaring time. I would like to get back into that whole thing, but I probably would do it with like one of the less recent Call of Duties that like I could get for like $20 and just like figure it out, you know?
Yeah, I mean, in truth, it being on Game Pass for me, like I don't understand the economics behind the decision, but I feel like there are a lot more people that I've talked to who are bouncing into this game who haven't touched Call of Duty in a really long time just because it is. And so they don't have to worry about, paying the $60, $70 for the game. They can just try it. And if they don't like it, they can bounce off of it. But it's essentially, I mean, I know you pay for Game Pass, but essentially free to try, which is nice.
Right on. Well, something crazy has happened, which is Techtic is hosting the quiz this week. Is this, I don't know what to do with my hands. What should we, Techtic, I guess the floor is yours. I don't know. This is wild.
Sit on those puppies and let's get right into it. So, Price is Right style, you get 1 + 1 or 1 0 or whatever you want to call it, infinitely small number. And who's got the head right now?
The rankings, that's right. Nerdbomber is 13-8. I'm 12-8. Techtic, you are 8-18. Steven, 2-1. So Nerdbomber will go first because she has the slightly better record.
All right. So Nerdbomber, this question's for you. How old is Rob Zombie?
I feel
Yeah,
like
the topic is Rob Zombie, by the way. You didn't mention that.
I'm rusty, guys.
I'm going to say he is, 58?
I love Techtic being like, let's just get on with it. Seems like a good answer. I do feel like he's probably older at this point. I'm going to go ahead and just come right out of the gate with my +1 and say 59.
That is a strong +1 because he is exactly 59 years old.
That's
So you guys are
I'm
coming
talking
out
about.
swinging right off the bat. This is great.
Yeah, I mean, these are the heavyweights. This is mano a mano here.
All right. So in what year was his first solo debut?
So he's 59, so you can back out. If I could do math, I'd be able to figure out. We're probably talking about the late 80s, early 90s, I would have to think. Because if he's... Yeah, that about makes sense. I'm going to say 1988. That year is just speaking to me right now for reasons that I can't really comprehend.
I'm going to say 1994.
So Nerdbomber takes this one and almost busts, but she's real close. It is 1996. So be careful though, Illeagle. She still has a +1.
Thanks for the heads up. I'm locked in. Let's do this.
All right. In addition to music, he's also shown up in various films. How many?
I feel like he probably has had a lot of cameos. I don't know, maybe like 12.
That's too many. Well, I think it's too many. And also, I don't have a +1. I'm going to say 4.
All right. So Nerdbomber, you busted, but you were much closer. The answer is 11.
I'll take it. That's what I'm talking about.
So back to his successful music career. How many albums has he sold worldwide?
Like, how many copies of his albums?
Correct.
I have never heard a Rob Zombie song, but that doesn't mean he's not popular.
What? It's like, that's akin to never playing Oregon Trail.
Yeah, well, I'm a sheltered individual. I'm going to say, we're certainly in the millions. I'm going to say 16.25 million.
16.25
All right, so you both busted.
Nice.
Damn it.
It's 15 million.
That's what I'm talking about. That's how we do it. It's 15 million flat.
Correct. All right.
So I'm up by 1 going into the last question. Okay, this is exciting.
In what year did he marry actress Sherry Moon?
I feel like this wasn't that long ago. Maybe 2005.
That's a strong guess. I think it was earlier than that. When was his first debut project? 96? You said 05. I'm going to say 99. He wanted to get in before Y2K.
All right, so this quiz is heating up between you two. Illeagle takes this one home. It was 2002.
I have to say, game respect game. There were so many close guesses on either
You guys
end
know how to guess.
in that quiz. We were letting it all hang out. I moved to 13-8. Nerdbomber to 13-9. So there's been a little flipperoo on the top of the rankings, and that moves me into the number 1 spot. Techtic standing pat at 8-18. I don't know whether that means there's enough time for you to crawl out of that hole. You're now in a 5-game hole. I think mathematically it's over. I'm not going to sit here and do the math, but I'll let you do the math if you need to. I will be hosting the quiz next week, at which point your long walk to redemption will begin. In the meantime, We want to thank you all for listening, and you can head over to patreon.com if you want more of the details on that. Patreon.com/Online Warriors Podcast. If you want to consider supporting the show, you can also support the show by heading to Apple Podcasts and or Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, and leaving us a review of the show, be it good or bad. We also shouted out our Twitter handles earlier on in the episode, and you can find those pretty easily at Online Warriors 1 is our main show account as well. And as a final PSA, I also kind of realized in the middle of this is the last episode that releases before Election Day here in the States. So also go vote. Early vote. Absentee ballot vote. Just vote. Just vote in general and do your thing. Rock the vote. That's like the thing from like the 90s, I believe. But go rock the vote and stay safe and keep on podcasting.